The email filing, installation, and configuration guide for server-side components. So we'll be focusing on the email filing service manager, the email filing exchange connector, and the server marker manager, excuse me. And we'll also be talking about the purger briefly as well, and a few other things. But it's mainly going to discuss what it takes to get your server-side components up and running in an email filing environment. Prerequisites are you'll need to have Microsoft.NET 4.5 installed. You do need to have the DM API 32-bit installed. This is optional if you happen to be installing email filing on a machine that has the DM server installed. It's not necessarily recommended, but if you happen to put it on like an index server in a smaller environment, you don't need to have that DM API installed. You do also need to have the MAPI client and collaboration data object 1.2.1 installed. Or you can choose to install MS Outlook itself. If you choose to install MS Outlook, you just need to make sure you use the 32-bit version of 2007, 2010, or 2013. However, the MAPI client can be downloaded from this link. It's free from Microsoft, and it is what I recommend you use instead of using Outlook. Let's check out my image here. This is the image that we'll be using to install all of this on. And you can see I have gone ahead and installed the DM API in the MAPI client for the sake of time, and this is server 2008 R2, a little cut off there, but this does have .NET 4.5 installed by default. First thing we'll want to do is create a work path. The work path, for those of you who may not know, is where emails temporarily reside while we wait for the email filing service to save them to DM. It can also house information about what folders are being monitored and what metadata should be in them. So it is basically a dedicated file share. We're going to call it the work path. If you want to call it something different, you certainly can. Just make sure you're consistent with it throughout. And you do need to ensure that the work path is shared and accessible to the email filing service. So I have already gone ahead and created the work path. As I said, I called it work path. And in the properties, I have given everyone permission to it. In the real world, you can set it up to where only certain accounts have permission to this, but you do need to be very careful because the clients need to be able to write to it as well. There's some documentation on how to configure that if you wish to. It's not complicated, just requires some doing. So once we've got the work path created and shared, we'll need to copy some files into it, specifically the XML file and the license file. For our purposes, we're going to use the license file that comes as the evaluation copy, and it's found right here. I will copy that and paste it in to the work path. You will not necessarily be using this evaluation copy. Hopefully you've purchased the product and you have your own full license copy, or full copy of the license to put in there. But this is where the license file goes, is inside the work path. Inside this subfolder called server, you'll see there's something email bulk filing config. We'll going to make a copy of that and paste it into the work path as well. Now, as it says here, we'll also need to edit the information to match your environment. What that means is, if we come in here to edit it, the library name. My library is not called legal. I called it OT. And sorry about that. My hand hit the mouse on my laptop and messed up everything. Okay. OTEF lib is what I call this one. The form we're using is LawMProf. You can verify what form you need to be using by coming into library maintenance, find the group that you're using. In this case, I'm in the Doc Supervisors group. Come down here to MS Outlook and see that I am using the LawMProf. So that form is the one we want to use. And these columns are the default columns for the LawMProf form. If you happen to be using a custom form, make sure you list that custom form here, and any custom columns on that form need to be listed here as well if you want the email filing service to work with them. This token here is the token that will appear when you monitor a folder inside of Outlook. It is the @ symbol by default. If you'd like to change that to being a different symbol, you simply delete it from here and make the change. Once you've got this configured, hit save and close. And we are done with the work path. The next thing we need to do is get the email integration registry keys in place. Now the easiest way to do that is to come to a client. Now this particular client I have already set up email filing on, and we'll just go through the process on it though. We'll come to the client deployment utility. If you're not already logged into DM, it will ask you to do so. What you'll do is come in here, plugins, document management plugin, email integration. Make sure you have the correct library selected up here. Make sure you choose the correct profile form here. And if you don't see the profile form you want to use, it likely isn't selected in library maintenance that we were just looking at, so check there. On this tab, on the header fields, these columns match up. Basically, this is the header information on the from for the email. We're going to save that into the email underscore from column on the profile table. We're going to set the to information to be saved to email underscore to. All of these are standard. The only one that doesn't matter is the BCC. This does not get saved. Email filing ignores this, so does DM. So this does not necessarily need to be set. However, I happen to have it set. If you have an older database or some custom columns of your own, you may be using different columns to save this information into. That's fine. Just make sure that you map them to the appropriate columns. Once this information is in place, we can close out of this control panel, come into the registry, and this information is stored in Software, Hummingbird, Email Integration 1.5 Settings, and then you'll see there's a library here where I have my profile form and a mappings folder here where all those mappings I have set are. Simply right click and export it, and you can export this file. I already happen to have done so. Email integration settings right here. And I've actually, for the sake of time, gone ahead and put those settings on this machine just to show you. Now this is slightly different. My client machine is 32-bit, my server is 64-bit, so under the server they will exist under the WoW 6432 node. They should. I guess I do not have them set. So we need to set them. Okay. I'm going to copy this over. Now, as I was mentioning, because my client's a 32-bit machine and this is a 64, I will need to come in and modify this to include the WoW 6432 node. Again, this is only necessary if you're using a client workstation that's a 32-bit operating system with a server that is a 64-bit operating system. So we'll save that, run this file. And now I can see my email integration 1.5 settings. There's my profile form and my field mappings, and these exist on the server now, which is what I needed. So those are in place. Next thing we will need to do is run a SQL script to create a table. Now this is another one that I believe I've already done, but we'll just take a quick look at the SQL server. I have. The table is called the IKM plugin settings. It's very simple to do though. All you have to do is come into your folder that has the script in it. So in the installation, there's one folder. There's 5 folders, subfolders, one of them called script. You'll see if you have Oracle or MS SQL, use the appropriate one. I just come in here, select all, copy, come into my SQL server, and here you can see I already pasted it, and I've already created this table, but simply it's a matter of hitting paste, execute, and you're all set. You will have an IKM plugin settings table that holds various data. And actually it holds data specifically in relation to the email filing configuration tool, which will be discussed in a different video. Okay, so now that we've got our work path set up, we've got our keys in place, and we've run the SQL script, it is time to start installing some things. Let's see here. Inside the server folder, you'll see that there's a number of components. We're going to start with the email filing service. Select it. The installation is generally pretty quick. You can change where you want to install to. I normally leave it in the default location. This, you want to make sure you put the domain name and then the username in this format. And the installation itself should not take too long. There we go. And now we have an email filing service manager. Okay. First thing we're going to want to do is set the work path. We recommend using a UNC path name. And I always like to test to make sure that it can get to this location by coming here to run. Sorry, a different piece of software timing me out. Okay, good. If I put that address in, it can get to it, so we're all set. I also, this is just a personal recommendation or preference even, not even recommendation. I don't mean to put it there. It's the wrong place. As far as the log location, there is a default logging location. I like to create my own folder underneath the work path called log, and that way it just keeps all of my email filing information together. And I know this location's already shared out to the service, so it will be able to navigate to this location. And so any log information will just get stored in this location. There's the options for handling duplicates. You can choose to log duplicates if you'd like. You can always save duplicates. You can never save duplicates, or you can save them based on a set of rules. The first one is save a copy when the user does not have access to an already saved item. This could be a security thing. Somebody saved an email and they set it with a particular set of security, and another recipient on that email may not have access to it due to that security, but they can save their own copy of it into DM that they can then access in the future. This option here, save a copy when metadata is different from an already saved item. This comes into play if, let's say, user A saves email with client, a particular set of client and matter data, and another user wants to save it with a different client and matter data. This will allow that to happen. You can control what pieces of metadata are looked at. There is a registry key that I cannot remember the name of right off the top of my head, but I believe it is going to come up here. Columns to ignore and duplicate check. So you can use this registry key here, read more about it if you'd like. There's an example down here of things that you may not want it to look at. For instance, abstract, which is also the description field. If there's a slightly different description in one email than in another, you may not want that to count as you may not want both of those to get saved. So you can use that registry key to control what metadata is compared. And then this last option will link the already saved item to the user's selected folder. That's not used as often. This is the most common configuration I see. The polling interval and the delay between emails are set this way. I would not recommend changing those unless you talk to somebody in support or you have a good reason to. Do not run the service between the times specified below. This is a good way to pause the service if you ever need to do maintenance on your DM servers, or if you know your Exchange environment is going to be going through some maintenance or whatever you might need it to pause for. This is how you can set it to pause and start at another time. So once you're done with all those changes, click Update like you saw me do, and make sure you do that. And we'll move on to the filing settings. A couple different options here. The first one is set filing user as typist. I recommend you set that, and I recommend you leave this activity text or set some sort of activity text. What this will do is exactly what it says. It will make the user who's filing the emails the typist inside of DM as opposed to the account that's running the email filing service manager. And the activity text is the only way to be able to tell if that email was saved through email filing or if it was saved through regular DM methods. This will add that to the activity log for you. You have the option to make emails read-only or declare them as a record automatically. Excuse me. And you can also use this feature here to set sender as typist or set sender as author. And you can also choose to do it only on thread or subject filing items, not all email filing items. And this does exactly what it says it does. It doesn't matter who saves the email to DM, it will set the from or the sender of the email as the typist and the author. In order to get this to work properly, though, the service does need to have access to a mailbox to get certain information from. So you do have to come in here and put in a mailbox information so it can use this user's mailbox to appropriately go through all these things. And we do need to make sure that we add this here. Okay, this is a new feature, the attachment count. It is only valid for people using 5.3.1 patch 6 or DM 10 patch 1 or newer, and you do basically it will handle embedded objects as DM versions, kind of as it says it is. There's much more information about this in the documentation. I would suggest you read that if you're interested in it. Moving on to the Purge Settings tabs. We'll talk about this tab a lot more at the end of the video when we talk about the Purger service. But be aware that this is here, and you can generate purge requests by checking this box. But again, we'll come back to this if you choose to use the purger. And the library configuration, you need to just come in here simply. There's 3 tabs. One lists the current libraries, one you can update your current libraries, and one to add. Since we don't have any, we'll come to add. And this is your DM server, not your email filing server. This is the DM library that email filing is going to connect to. And one of these days I'm going to type it in properly. There we go. The library is OTEFlib. This is the user account that will be used to connect to DM, so it does need to be a valid DM account, and it does need to be in the Docs Supervisors group. If you have multiple libraries, you can add multiple libraries through here. And again, now that I've added it, it's listed here. If for some reason I need to come in and change this library, let's say I want to point to a new DM server, or I want to change the user account that we use to connect to DM, I can do so here. Logging, and by default this one comes split size at 5 megabytes. I do recommend you either leave that at 5 megabytes or maybe increase it slightly if you choose, but you do want to have the log split size set, otherwise the logs can be rather large and unmanageable. Error reporting, it's pretty simple. You can enable error reporting by checking this box. You can have it change the system tray message when an error occurs. You can have it automatically maximize the email filing service, so if an error occurs, it'll pop up and be right in front of the screen. More commonly used is to send an email when an error occurs, and you can put in the FSMTP server, the to and the from address, and it will send an address or send an email to whomever is relevant on when an error occurs. If this is all optional, you don't have to do any of this if you don't wish. So this is the configuration for it. We're all ready to start it up. One other thing we want to do is set a registry key called use message ID, and this can be found in the registry guide. This is a great guide. I highly recommend flipping through this if you get some free time. And it is a DM key under the email integration 1.5 settings, and it's a D-word value, and again, it is recommended. And what this does is it helps control what value from the header information gets saved into DM when it is saved, like the identifying information, I should say. So we'll put that in place and set it to 1. And we went through all this. All right. Now we hit the start button and wait. I don't think it took for some reason. Oh, there it goes. And it's running. We have installed and successfully configured the email filing service manager. Next up will be the Exchange connector. We'll come back to our installation folder. There's a subfolder called Exchange connector. All this is going to be the same as the last time. This does need to be a domain account, and it's a domain admin. I don't know if I mentioned that last time. Another quick installation. Okay, here's my email filing Exchange connection manager. First thing we're going to want to do is set the work path. It's going to use the same work path as this. So I like to just come in and copy and paste, because I sometimes make typos, and do the same thing with the log path. Keep all the logs together, makes life simple. This category text is the temporary category text that will appear when an email is originally processed by the Exchange connector. It will not last. It will disappear when the server marker manager runs through and updates the emails to confirm that they have been saved in DM. The category text is bulked by default. You can put whatever you'd like there, pending. It can be blank if you don't want any category text there. Do not run time, same as with the other service. If you know there's a maintenance window or something of that nature, you can check the times to start and stop the service, or start and stop. Delay, this is how often it will rescan an individual user. Once it's scanned a user, it'll wait 15 minutes before it tries scanning that user again. This is set at default for production environments. This is pretty standard. In test environments, we'll often set that down to 1 minute because we don't want to wait 15 for emails to process through. But again, 15 is a pretty good standard time. This item here, you can read more information about reset object type and padding. Simply put, it helps correct some errors when the entry ID doesn't match on the Exchange server. It can resolve some errors there. Again, just recommend you check that. If you're going to be using the replicate folders feature, you'll want to check this box as well. That can be read about a little more in the documentation how that works, but to enable it through Exchange Connector, make sure that is checked. If you don't want to support public folders, you can check this box and it'll make sure the Exchange Connection Manager does not try to scan any public folders. And this is nice, it sends a request to unmonitor folder when folder not found. If the Exchange Connector, if a user tries to monitor a folder, or it does monitor a folder, excuse me, and then deletes that folder from Outlook without unmonitoring it in the AutoBulk filer, the Exchange Connector will continue to try to scan that folder, and it'll get an error message from the Exchange server saying this folder does not exist. This new feature, if this is checked, will send a request to unmonitor that folder from the user, so the service will stop trying to scan that folder, and the Exchange Connector will stop throwing the error, and it will not fill up the error log. So that's a handy feature. Next tab is the Exchange Settings, and you'll want to, here we go. Set the web services address to the URL of the Exchange web server. So depending on how you have things set up, this is going to look a little different for each site. Open text, for instance, would look like that. Unfortunately, OpenText does not give me permission to have an impersonation account on their Exchange servers, so I have used my own, which I can put in that format. If you happen to be using a clustered or multiple Exchange servers in a clustered environment, you'll want to check this option here so it will work properly with that cluster. And this is the Exchange impersonation account. I won't talk about it in too much detail here. It does basically what it does is it goes out and pretends to be each individual user in your environment to connect to the Exchange server to get the information that it's looking for. How to configure this can be looked up in the documentation. We do recommend that you have an Exchange admin do this. It's not too difficult. It's a matter of creating a role, taking in an account and assigning it to that role, and at that point that account becomes what we call an impersonation account. Again, there is far more details on this in the documentation, and there are scripts that you can run in the Excel command prompt. So we will use this. Why, that's all caps. And update. Nice feature on this new version is the ability to test. I can come in here and test if my impersonation account is going to work properly for a specific SMTP address. I happen to have an address called efadmin, and you can see that's just a random mailbox in my Exchange environment, and my account here was able to impersonate as that user. So that's a way you can test to make sure that this is set up properly. Thread and subject filing, we won't talk about too much in this video. If you're familiar with how to use them and you want to use them, this is where you would go to enable them. You can dedicate it for thread or subject filing. If you happen to have a lot of folders being scanned by this, you can set up a separate instance of the Exchange connector on its own separate machine, dedicate it to just do thread and subject filing. Here's where you can enable them on the server, and you can also choose which folders to be monitored and the option to not file unread items, and of course there's an option to only process items older than so many days or newer than X number of days. One thing to make note of, if you are going to use thread and subject filing on the server, on the client side there is a key called run thread filing on server that must be in place if you plan on using thread filing or subject filing through the Exchange connector. So we're not going to set that up too much here. Again, can check these, uncheck them, it doesn't really matter. Just don't want to check the dedicated because we want it to do not just thread filing but other things. We're not going to save or change it there. And we're going to add a library, very similar to how we did last time. Come in here. And use it. And by the way, this case sensitive is if you happen to be using for some reason, let's say you've got a MS SQL database that is set to be case sensitive, or you have an Oracle database that is not case sensitive, checking that box will override the case sensitivity of those things. Okay, so now that I've added that on here, it's listed, and we can update it if we need to. And let's start it up. It's running. We successfully installed and configured the email filing exchange connector. Next up is the Server Marker Manager. The installation is going to look pretty straightforward and probably monotonous by now. Another quick install. Okay, so for this one, first thing to do on this General Settings tab, we see the work path. Copying and pasting is our friend. And use the same log. Now back up here, this is the text that will appear in the category when the email has been confirmed that it saved the DM. So before we talked about that bulked text shows up temporarily in the category while we wait to the email to be actually saved in DM and confirmed by the marker. This is the text that will appear after it has been confirmed that it's in DM. This setting here is the text that you set here. These need to match. The email filing server manager needs to know what was the text that we put on temporarily so I know to remove it. So this says if you see the words bulked in a category and it's saved in DM, remove that text that says bulked because we don't need it there. So this field should always match this field. Yep. Okay. And if you'd like to set the pause time, you certainly can. Works the same way as the other ones. The reset object type and padding I recommend you select, and the do not support public folders is the same as the other one. The exchange settings will be the exact same as your exchange settings from here. You can use all of the same information. Okay. The auto marking settings. So this is the tab that controls the auto marking feature of the marker. There's the auto marking and the extended marking. I won't talk too much about the difference of those in this video, but be aware that there's two sort of separate scans that can be run by the marker. One of them marks emails as they're saving to DM. The other one kind of goes back and scans things that are already saved in DM and is sort of a cleanup type or safety net. So this box tells it whether or not you even want it to perform auto marking. You can uncheck that and it will only do extended scans. There's the advanced settings options. Won't talk about this too much. It requires a little bit of knowledge of T-SQL. This can be used to further specify which users this marker will be run against. Again, the documentation can provide a little bit more detail if that's something you choose to use. The delay between check for new documents, this is how long it'll wait between asking the DM server for a list of the new emails saved to DM for it to mark. And you can limit the automatic marking to only occur for these folders if you wish. The used domain for exchange impersonation and search all address list, leave this the way it is unless you're talking to somebody in support or somebody in development and they suggest that you change that. You can exclude groups, but again, these things here I recommend keeping the same unless you're asked to do so. Only process emails for within mail domains, so we'll go ahead and put in my mail domain here. And belonging to an exchange group. I don't have any exchange groups. If I did, I could check this option and the marker would only mark emails for the selected users that belong to that group. If you're going to select this option to belonging to exchange groups, make sure you select this auto refresh and choose a time for it. 1, 2 in the morning, sometime when the service or users aren't using it is probably ideal. What this will do is if you have an Exchange group and users are added to that group and the cache isn't refreshed, those users still won't get marked. So once a day, you can tell it to go refresh its list of people in that Exchange group, and it will do so. This button here will allow you to do so immediately, but this will do it on a schedule, and I do recommend that if you're going to have this option selected. Of course, I don't have any Exchange groups to show you. This section down here isn't so much configuration. If you happen to want to go back and rescan items that were saved in the past, you can use these things here. Once the library is set, it'll be available here. You can choose a date, and it'll start scanning from that date forward and do everything up to that period of time. Yes, sir. The extended scan settings are here. Again, the extended scan is the scan that goes through items that are already saved into DM and updates the category if it needs to, and things of that nature. If you choose, you can dedicate it for an extended scan. You can install a separate instance of the marker manager on a different machine than your primary email filing server. Choose this option, and it'll do nothing but extended scan. Excuse me. And that is recommended for people who are doing extended scans of more than like this 14 days by default. If you're going to go back, like some people, users 365 days or 2 years, you do need to probably have an extended, a dedicated extended scan. Excuse me. And of course, you can change the number of days that the scan will go back. It's going to look, this is the date of the emails. So this is going to look back at emails that have been created in the last 2 weeks. Again, if I'm going to set my own dedicated up, I can get this number a bit higher. So it'll look at every email generated in the last year, and once a week it'll do that and update the category information as needed. I can set a schedule if I want it to only run on weekends between these hours, or weekdays. You can set it how you like. You can tell the extended scan to scan the inbox, the sent items, the deleted items, the auto bulk folders, or the thread filing folders. Every instance is different, but quite often I find that people don't save items in their inbox or their sent items, and those happen to be the largest. So by unchecking these, we can save a lot of time and processing power. Unless you really need to have those two scanned by the extended scan, I recommend you uncheck those two. The deleted items as well, come to think of it. If you want, you can have items that are not saved into DM marked with category text. It's actually sometimes a handy troubleshooting tool. The allow reset file status, what this will do is if an email is touched by the Exchange connector and it gets a flag in its billing information column that says bulk filed, but for some reason gets aired out and is not saved in DM, when the extended scan runs through the service and it touches that email, it will see that the email has the flag saying it was touched by the Exchange connector but not saved to DM, and it'll reset that flag. So the next time the Exchange connector runs through it, it'll try to save that email again. It's kind of a redundancy, duplicate, safety net type thing. And of course, the cleanup rules, if you'd like to apply those, you can do so by checking these options here. You can choose to enable it and tell it how long you want the email to have been in DM before you delete it, or how long you want it to have existed in Outlook before you delete it. And we'll save those settings. And this is a little cut off, but down here is the configure button. Adding a library for the marker is a little different than the other components, but it's not difficult. We'll just come here to add library. And the other ones we would type in all the information and then hit add. This one you want to hit add first, and you can put in the server. And then select the library and put in your user ID and password. Again, don't worry about this stuff too much. This case sensitive is very rarely used. See, it was this, and this is only used for DM6 customers, which are few and far between these days. So we'll click OK. And if I need to edit this or remove it, I certainly can. But what I want to do is edit the profile of it. And I don't know why you have to do this, but you hit refresh, and all of this fills itself in. And we check this box, the mark save mail with extracted metadata from profile. And this is where we can pick what kind of metadata we want to show up in the category. I normally go with doc number and let's say author. So now when the marker runs, it will add the doc number and the author into the category for a particular email. And we do recommend, and I forgot to mention this on the Exchange connector. Let me just... Okay. So this log split size, I recommend you set that to 5 or 10 or whatever it is you feel is necessary. But and I will go back actually and do this for the Exchange connector as well, because again, the log files can become very large and unruly otherwise. Okay. Well, I think we have this as configured as it needs to be. Let's start it up and see what happens. Nope. We missed something. I missed something. No. I check these boxes when I don't have an Exchange group, which I should have known better than to do. Okay, now we have successfully installed and configured the email server marker manager. Final thing we're going to look at is the email purger. This is an optional utility. What it does is it deletes emails out of the user's mailbox as they're saved to DM. Again, same login process or same installation process as all the others. And it does so by generating purge requests, and then the purge utility picks up those requests and processes them. So, come on. Let's take a look at the Purge Manager. And before we look at this too much, I'm actually going to go back. I mentioned that we would look at this again later on, and now we're going to. The Purge Settings. The Purge utility uses its own work path. And again, what happens is the Email Filing Service Manager will create a request and put that request in this special work path, and then the Purge Manager will scan that work path and respond accordingly. So I'm going to come in here and create a new folder called Purge WP for work path. This also does need to be shared. And again, we do recommend UNC format for the name. And you can say, do not generate purge requests for the thread subject filing when filed by, and these are the various options, the bulk filer or the Exchange connector on locally configured clients, inbox sent items. Only generate purge requests for users belonging to this DM group. If you wanted to only do it, you could create a DM group called Purge and add the users in there and then put that word in there, and it would only purge for users that were part of that DM group. So we're going to update this. We'll need to restart the service. But we're going to copy that and put it in there. And I'm going to use the same log location as the other one. Purge category text can be changed there. 3 options for how it will delete. Move to deleted items means it's going to take the emails and just put them in the deleted items folder until the user deletes them themselves. Soft delete does not put them in the deleted items folder. It deletes them, but it does so in a manner that it can be recovered using Microsoft tools. More information about that and how to do that. There's actually a link in the documentation to the Microsoft article on how to do that. And a hard delete is what it sounds like. It deletes the email and it is gone. You can choose a delay for how long it takes to delete. So when the purge request generates, it'll wait an hour or 2 hours before it actually deletes that email if you choose to set that. The pause works the same as all of the others, and the reset object type and padding works the same as all the others, and I do recommend you set that as well. And these Exchange settings are going to be pretty familiar as well. We'll just come in here. Paste them in. Update, and I forgot to mention this, and this exists on all 3, or this exists on this, the Exchange connector and the server marker manager. Use delay before trying again after EWS throttling. If you get a throttling error from the Exchange connector, basically saying you've made too many calls in too short a period of time, you have to wait. you'll tell it, okay, the Exchange connector already said we're getting shut off for throttling errors. Don't try communicating again for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you have it set for. That'll keep the log from filling up with a bunch of error messages that say your Exchange service has hit its, or your connection account has hit its throttling limit. So let's see if this will start up. It does, and we have successfully installed and configured the email Purger Manager. And that is the conclusion of this particular video. There are other videos on client-side installation and configuration. If you have any questions about this video, please feel free to post a comment and someone will respond accordingly. Thank you.